Hello everyone, so today we are looking at Act 2 Scene 7. We're in Belmont in Portia's house for this scene. So we're returning to the relationship between Portia and the Prince of Morocco, and we're going to be looking at the caskets in more detail today, which is very exciting. So Portia is the first person to speak. She says, "Go draw aside the curtains and discover the several caskets to this noble prince. Now make your choice." So she calls him a noble prince. She's obviously trying to be nice to him. She's trying to flatter him in the same way that she did in the previous scene that we saw between them. She is aware of his high status and the fact that he could potentially be her husband, so she is trying to be nice to his face. Morocco then starts speaking out loud. He doesn't actually address Portia particularly, apart from the final question, but he could be talking to himself. He said, "The first of gold who this inscription bears, who chooseth me, shall gain what many men desire. The second silver, which this promise carries, the who chooseth me shall get as much as he deserves. The third, dull lead, with warning all as blunt, who chooseth me must give and hazard all he hath. How shall I know if I do choose the right?" Portia then responds and says, "One of them contains my picture, Prince. If you choose that, then I am yours withal." So the general premise is there are three caskets. One is gold, one is silver, and one is lead. All three of them have different messages on the top that tell them tell the chooser, in this case the Prince of Morocco, like a message. So they'll either gain what many men desire, they'll either get as much as they deserve, or they have to give and hazard all they have. The winning one has a picture of Portia inside, so that's what they're looking for. Portia says, "Then I am yours with all." That suggests obviously transfer of ownership. Then I am yours. If she chooses the correct casket, obviously linking to the patriarchal society in the Elizabethan era at the time. Morocco then starts to speak to himself. Okay, he's talking to himself. He addresses himself, pause there, Morocco, in third person. And he's basically talking through the pros and cons of each casket. He initially said, "Men that hazard all do in hope of fair advantages." So basically what he's saying there is men who risk it all do it in hope of fair gain, essentially. So he's trying to balance out the risk he's making for the gain he will make if it pays off. This is true of a lot of the men in Merchant of Venice, especially Bassanio. Bassanio obviously has not only risked his own money, but he's risked Antonio's money and indeed Antonio's flesh. Antonio has risked his own body and his money for Bassanio. Okay, so lots of the characters in Merchant of Venice have kind of risked something in hope to gain something. Okay, and then we move on to the next page. Now, there's quite a lot of annotations on here. I do apologise, but I have done a drawing to try and entertain you later on. So, he said initially, "Pause there, Morocco, and weigh thy value with an even hand. If thou best rate by their estimation, thou dost deserve enough, and yet enough may not extend so far as to the lady. And yet to be afeard of my deserving were but a weak disabling of myself. As much as I deserve, why, that's the lady. I do in birth deserve her, and in fortune, in graces and qualities of breathing, but more than in these, in love I do deserve." So he's talking about the silver casket here, the one that gave the message, there, the second silver which this promise carries, who chooseth me shall get as much as he deserves. So essentially the casket challenge, the casket contest, is designed to reveal the minds of the suitors to Portia, and hopefully, you know, choose her a suitor. Father chooses her a suitor from beyond the grave that is worthy of her, if that makes sense. It's designed to try and reveal their ethical values, so what they value most, leading to them making that decision. And we obviously learn a lot about the Prince of Morocco in this speech. Here, there's obviously the way he's talking to himself is about the fact that he feels like he deserves her. He deserves her in terms of his status, in his birth, in how much wealth he has, in his breeding, and he deserves her in love. But he's asking himself, what if that isn't enough? So this could be interpreted in two ways. One, that he's overly proud, that he feels like he does deserve her, and, you know, is being arrogant and full of himself. But the other is a little bit of humility, potentially. So it's completely the opposite. Maybe he's actually acknowledging that even though he has good breeding and he is wealthy and he is high status, that still might not be enough for Portia. So it depends entirely on the audience's interpretation, the director's interpretation, how he wants to play the Prince of Morocco here. And then he looks at the gold casket. This one is essentially him talking about her being a high value object, so he's objectifying her a bit. But then he moves over to the lead one, and this one is interesting. So it's like the lead contains her, 'twere a damnation to think that so base a thought. It were too gross to rib her in cerecloth in the obscure grave. I think I said that right. He's horrified by this thought. Lead was a really cheap material. It was easily available. It also reminded him of the grave, so he reminds him of death, and he thinks that Portia is too beautiful, too valuable to be enshrined in something as horrifying as death, even if it is just her picture. Okay. Never so rich a gem, he says about her. He's calling her a valuable item. Again, a gem is something you possess. It's dehumanizing Portia. It's taking away her human qualities and making her into an object that's just worth what it's valued at. Which makes us feel a little bit sorry for Portia, of course. Okay, and then he chooses the golden casket. So again, there's another reference to Portia being his, linking to the patriarchal society, obviously. We have to remind ourselves here as well that if we watch Merchant of Venice, Portia doesn't know which casket her picture is in. She has absolutely no idea, so she wouldn't be able to say anything to the Prince of Morocco while he was choosing. And the actress could play this in a way that, shows her anxiety, that she doesn't know, while he's talking through, she doesn't know which one her picture is behind. She can't steer him in any way if she might choose to. So this would be quite stressful, I think, for Portia. Morocco then says, "Oh hell, what have we here? A carrion death, within whose empty eye there is a written scroll. I'll read the writing." Okay, so first of all, he obviously is shocked at the beginning. A carrion death, within whose empty eye there is a written scroll. I'll read the writing. Essentially, what he's found instead of Portia's picture is a human skull with a written scroll in the eye socket. There you go, I've written you. Oh, nice picture. I've written ironic down there as well because obviously he was horrified by the lead casket because it reminded him of the grave, it reminded him of death, and actually the golden casket that he opened literally had a symbol for death inside a skull. Like a physical reminder of death. Horrifying. It starts off with all the if this says glitters, it will say glisters in your copy. It's just a slight tweak in the writing in terms of this PDF copy. All that glisters is not gold. Often you have heard that told. That's a proverb, and it was actually made famous by Shakespeare in Merchant of Venice. It's been used, in lots of literature, and in just songs since then. It's been used by Tolkien in the Lord of the Rings series. It's been used by Kanye West. It's a really famous proverb. It was around before Shakespeare wrote it down, just to let you know. Like, it wasn't like Shakespeare invented it, but this is kind of where it gained fame and reputation. So it essentially means don't judge a book by its cover. And that goes on. So, many a man in his life hath sold, but my outside to behold, gilded tombs do worms enfold. This is a metaphor. It means the wealth and sensory value often disguises a lack of core value. Do you like how I wasn't quite a rhyme because I said value twice, but still nearly. I'm nearly Shakespeare. So that's linking to the theme of appearance versus reality. Something that appears beautiful often may not be within. So it's don't judge by appearances alone, which is obviously what the Prince of Morocco did. He took the most obviously valuable casket, which matches his personality. He's as a character, he's very, loquacious. He's clearly enamoured by appearances. He likes himself to appear intelligent and wealthy and, wants to be respected in everything, understandably. But it makes sense that he's gone for the most obvious obviously valuable choice, which, if you think about it for 5 seconds, if you're going to make a hard casket challenge, you're not going to put your daughter's picture in the obvious choice, are you? Because then that's not difficult at all. So again, it's a little bit of a silly choice from the Prince of Morocco, but we'll ignore. Had you been as wise as bold, young in limbs, in judgment old, your answer had not been inscrolled. Fare you well, your suit is cold. It's all written in rhyming couplets, classic Shakespeare. Okay. The Prince of Morocco is sad. He says, Portia, adieu. I have too grieved a heart to take a tedious leave, thus losers part. Exit with his train, flourish of cornets. I am too sad for a long goodbye. Dramatic exit is what the Prince of Morocco's done. I think in this situation I would like to take the most dramatic exit possible as well, because remember, what he's sworn himself to is essentially a life where he can't marry anyone because he lost that. So he played a high stakes game and he lost, sadly. Portia has absolutely no sympathy. A gentle riddance. Draw the curtains, go. Let all of his complexion choose me so. Racist. Racist comment from Portia. So clearly here, where he says, she says, let all of his complexion choose me. So this has got a double meaning. It refers to both his temperament, his actual nature, and also his skin. So this is obviously racist. Again, it links back to that theme of prejudice that runs throughout The Merchant of Venice. We've seen it so much already. And sometimes a modern day director might choose to cut out this line because it's genuinely so offensive. It highlights societal issues at the time with, prejudice and racism, not just against, Jewish people, which we've seen a lot so far and we've learnt a lot about in terms of context, but also against people like the Prince of Morocco who are not white. All right, I'm going to carry on with scene 8 in just a second, so I'll see you in a sec.